So, where were we? Here we go. The fourth. We're looking for the fourth of the four. Problem of literalism. So far, not been very impressed with these limits, no. The first one I conceded, but yeah. Well, the first one was just fine, but the consequences, like, it was not a significant big problem. But look, let's look at this. Alright, the fourth literalist enigma is literal. Alright. No. The fourth literalist enigma is literal objective knowledge itself, or rational thought, which is assumed from the beginning of the literal objective world to have fundamentally one-to-one correspondence with reality. Yeah, and that's just not the case, right? This is like the text kind of the text is talking about epistemology, but it seems like if you just take, right? If you just do this, knowledge. Oh, and we got a Wikipedia article here. All right. Knowledge is a familiarity, awareness, or understanding of someone or something, such as facts, skills, or objects. By most accounts, knowledge can be acquired in many different ways and from many different sources, including but not limited to perception, reason, memory, testimony, scientific inquiry, education, practice. The philosophical study of knowledge is called epistemology. Oh, there's epistemology? What is it, epistemology? Alright. We don't need to read this whole article to say that it is assumed from the beginning that the literal objective world have a fundamentally one-to-one correspondence with reality. That's not the case. That is the correspondence theory. Actually, we can find that in truth. We can find here. That's the first one. Correspondence. The correspondence theory of truth. That is one idea in philosophy, and most people reject this idea, right? Most philosophers reject this idea because, just like this text is saying, that's kind of, it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. It doesn't work out. The correspondence theory, it's just not good enough. So attacking the literalist, I mean, this is probably, like, if you haven't thought about it and done philosophy, then you kind of get the feeling, like, what is truth? Yeah, it's, right? It's what I see, right? That is the truth. It corresponds with what, right? The true beliefs and true statements correspond with the actual state of affairs. Yeah, exactly. That you think that your observation equals the actual state of affairs. I mean, that kind of makes sense from an intuitive point of view, right? So that's not a limit of literalism. That's a limit of intuitism. Right? Stuff that one intuitively believe, or that one might, not even that one like one's intuition tells oneself. It's one might have that intuition. It is a common intuition to have. Yeah. Alright, so, but how is the literalist to know? How can literal thought determine whether literal thought is literally representing reality? Just as there can be nothing within an android that can validate whether it is conscious, so there can be nothing within rational thought that can validate thinking itself. One can only judge the accuracy of thought, meaning the fundamental thinkableness of reality by experiencing from a standpoint external to rationality. But this is something the literalist cannot do. Yeah, this doesn't go with my understanding of philosophy, like, at all, right? It kind of feels like short Wikipedia search about these, well, not exactly these things, but this is talking about epistemology. It's like there's a gap in the knowledge from this text's point of view, right? There's been no study of the philosophical idea of epistemology at all. I don't know. Right, this problem, called the independent axis problem, cripples the progress of physicalist understanding that modern literalists appeal to. How is one to further knowledge or discover a mere elementary law than those which currently... Right, or discover more elementary law than those which currently obtain, unless one steps out of the known and introduces a new hypothesis which is ultimately unrelated to the interconnected network of perceptions and conceptions that physicalism is based on. Right. All knowledge has been built based on... They are predicated on basic assumptions, right? And within that system of knowledge that you use, whatever that system is, there is plenty of different systems of knowledge that one uses, right? It's not black and white, as it said, right? When we looked at knowledge, there were plenty of different types of knowledge. And you build that knowledge from within, you build that knowledge within yourself, right? Based upon a certain methodology. And you build and you build and you build knowledge. Right? The knowledge that you have today has been built in the same way that the knowledge that you're building tomorrow, right? So what you currently obtain is it is equally weak to the stuff that you build upon that knowledge, right? Or side by that knowledge. From this argument, from this text's argument, all the knowledge have the same weakness. Right? But if the text is, and that's my understanding of what the text is saying, that all this knowledge is pointless because knowledge has this weakness, therefore it's pointless, which would make all knowledge pointless, and which would make the term unusable, right? Because then there is no knowledge, and therefore we're not talking about knowledge, we're talking about something else. I don't know. This, one of the great mysteries of science, is unsolvable by science, because you have to make a non-literal leap over the factual cause fence in order to do so. Maybe, right? It's not... I mean, as far as those fences that we've been talking about, all these limits, these borders that you cannot go beyond, my understanding of it are that they are bendable. Yeah, they are bendable. You can... Yeah, definitely bendable. So something that seems to be unsolvable today might not be unsolvable. Maybe it will be solved in 100 years, right? We don't know. We cannot know this at this very moment, right? If it is unsolvable or not. That knowledge you do not have. But yeah, you have to make a non-literal leap over that. Yeah. All knowledge are based on a few basic principles. Sure, that's science is. It's based on principles that, just like religion is based on principles. Right? You make a few basic assumptions and you build your worldview based on those basic assumptions. And that is pretty much, I think, everyone does that. A few basic assumptions, at least. That's the whole point of my internalized version of Occam's razor. The whole point of it is to reduce the amount of assumptions that one does. But you have to make assumptions. That there's like no way around that. Which I suppose is the point of the text, right? That's why they say unsolvable, because you have to make some assumptions, and those assumptions will always have to be made. Maybe I'll add. All right, Immanuel Kant, Henri Poincaré, I don't know who that is, Albert Einstein, and Max Planck all made this point, as did in a different way David Hume. He did indeed. Who argued that experience can never lead to reliable general principles, because such principles rest on a dependable regularity which can never be found in experience. Wait. Experience can never lead to reliable general principles? Sure. Well, kind of feels like reliable here is a value judgment, right? Reliability. I mean, what's that? They're not reliable in the strict logical definition of reliable, I suppose. Yeah. So they can never lead to reliable general principles? Sure. Through statistics, though, we can find reliability. But it depends on your definition of reliable here. But through statistics, you can find... Wait, is that really reliability, though? It's called something else, isn't it? Where is that thing? Oh, it's not even here. No, reliable is a... I thought one of these was reliability, but it's not. I was thinking that we cannot find a... let's see. Premises are true, then the conclusion follows. Yeah, wait. Determining validity and strength. If we assume that the premises are true, does that the conclusion follow? I mean, we can find validity, but we don't find soundness, right? Because we cannot know if all the premises are true. So they are unsound from, yeah. All science is unsound from a specific point of view. But reliability, you can't, right? Reliability is a scale. Alright, I remember now. Actually, does that thing have its own thing? Reliability. Alright, we've got computing, statistics, engineering, theoretical concept, reliabilism, category in the theories of philosophical discipline of epistemology, has been advanced as a theory of both justification and of knowledge. Process reliabilism has been used as an argument against skepticism, such as the brain in a vat thought experiment. Process reliabilism is a form of epistemic externalism. What is this? A broadly reliabilist theory of knowledge is roughly as follows. One knows that P stands for any proposition, for example, that the sky is blue, if and only P is true. One believes that P is true, and one has arrived at a belief that P through some reliable process. Oh, right. Yeah, so here we go. Like a reliable process would be this. In statistics and psychometrics, reliability is the overall consistency of a measure. A measure is said to have high reliability if it produces similar results under consistent conditions. Alright, yeah, so experience in itself cannot lead to reliable general principles. Right? That is because you need to take in statistics, right? If you experience one thing one time, it's not very reliable. 2 times, a little bit more reliable. 300,000 times, it's kind of reliable. The sun is gonna rise tomorrow. I can say that with quite high reliability, right? And as a general principle, I can have a general principle that the sun is gonna rise tomorrow. Which is interesting because when you look at science from a different point of view, the sun does not rise, right? That doesn't happen. But from an experience, so I don't know. If you mix in statistics, and if you want to use the idea of reliability, I kind of want to do that. To build a general principle, right? You do that through induction. Yeah, you do it through an inductive argument. You build a reliability. Yeah, probability. Yeah. Reliability becomes a scale when we talk about that. Alright, because such principles rest on a dependable regularity which can never be found in experience. But it can be, right? Maths can be found in experience. You can have the experience of doing math and doing statistics and talking to other people that report, right? Those things are found in experience. Do we just reject that? Just because we don't have a direct access? Why? Right, we can never be completely sure that the next swan we come across won't be bright red. Oh, why didn't they use the black swan? The black swan is so much fun. Yeah, that's why we use inductive logic, right? While we remain within the coordinates of the knowable, we can never be sure that the laws of nature don't change or evolve, or that an untested hypothesis, of which there are an infinite number, doesn't more accurately fit the facts. Yeah, I completely agree with this. Yeah, I completely agree with this statement. We can never be sure. That's why we do inductive stuff, statistics and whatnot. Hume himself was driven to despair by his famous problem of induction. Oh! Because it invalidates scientific certainty. Isn't that great? I mean, scientific certainty. I mean, that's a goal and an attitude. But no, not an attitude. It's a goal, right? The goal is scientific certainty, but that's not what you get from science. That's not... Yeah, you have... It's like a utopia, right? This is what we strive for. We know that it's not doable, but we learn a lot of cool things along the way. So what is the problem of induction? Which is once again why physicalists pretend that it doesn't exist or is of no importance. Pretend? That's a straw man. Alright, what is the problem of induction? induction. The black swan problem. Yeah, I've heard this before. The black swan problem? That's funny. Yeah. Alright. The problem of induction is the philosophical question of what are the justifications, if any, for any growth of knowledge or any growth of knowledge understood in the classic philosophical sense. So what is the classical philosophical sense? Knowledge that goes beyond a mere collection of observations.
Real horror show. It's very realistic. You could even get the heavy breathing and panting of the tall-chopping mouth chicks.
Right. Highlighting the apparent lack of justification in particular for classical justified true belief. Justified true belief is a definition of knowledge that gained approval during the Enlightenment. Justified standing in contrast to revealed. There have been attempts to track it back to Plato and his dialogues, more specifically in The Thing and the Thing. The concept of justified true belief states that in order to that a given proposition is true, one must not only believe that a relevant true proposition. Alright. I don't pretend that this is not important. And yeah, I agree that there is a sidestep, right? Actually, yeah. It definitely exists. But there are ways to sidestep it, right? Like, that's called pragmatism. Actually, maybe pragmatism would say that it's not of importance. Like, if you go a pure pragmatic route, then the pragmatic route would say, oh, it's not important. And I don't agree with that. I would say that, yeah, this exists and it is important to explore it. But it doesn't invalidate the idea of knowledge. Yeah, it does not invalidate the idea of knowledge. And that's right, that's binary thinking. That's black and white thinking. Thinking that, oh, this problem exists, therefore all knowledge is dumb and we cannot have knowledge. Right? Because if we cannot have knowledge and all knowledge is dumb, right? Language is knowledge, all language is dumb. And how can you use these words and think anyone will understand you? Because knowledge is like, you end up in a... Right? You end up in a conclusion where it's like nowhere near the actual experience of people, right? This thing ends up where if knowledge is impossible, it's clearly not. Since you understand, well, you build an understanding of what I'm saying. Right? You do patterns, you move around in your life. Right? If knowledge was impossible, then any type of act with intent would be impossible. Alright, it's a philosophical problem, yeah. And it's definitely worth exploring, just like all the other philosophical problems are worth exploring. Alright. Highlighting the apparent lack of justification, this is the problem of induction again. Right. The thing that we have problems with are generalizing about the properties of a class of objects based on some number of observation of particular instances of that class. For example, the inference that all swans we have seen are white, and therefore all swans are white, before the discovery of black swans, or presupposing that a sequence of events in the future will occur as it has always done in the past. For example, that the law of physics will hold as they have been observed to hold. Hume called this the principle of uniformity of nature. Yeah, the apparent lack of justification. Yeah, there is an apparent lack of justifications, sure. I don't know. Yeah, I think this is a straw man, right? This is a person who's just snowed in on this problem and see this problem in everywhere. And since they have snowed in on this problem, nothing else matters. Only this problem matters. And everybody else who don't care about these problems, they are liars. Right? They are liars. It's like that. Yeah, I've heard that before. Like often that's an argument, right? Someone does not believe the way I believe, therefore they are a liar. And that's I can't get behind that kind of attitude. It's rude. It's rude, and it's what's that word? Delusions of grandeur, right? Because what I believe, that is the real life. Like it's that what I believe is true, and my opinions are the right opinions, and everybody who disagrees with me must be liars. Right? That delusions of grandeur, indeed. Right, extreme literalists, physicalists, consider the universe to be entirely composed of separate, comprehensible parts, particles or granules relating to each other in predictable ways in order to produce a measurable outcome. Yes. Right. That is an assumption. Right? You don't literally have to believe that, but that is the assumption within this methodology of the physicalist, the scientist, right? That is the assumption that the scientist makes. And lo and behold, we get knowledge that is useful. All right. And then the text continues that the universe or reality is, like the self, a kind of machine. Yeah, that is the approach one takes. It does not necessarily mean that one has to believe that is the case. Right? Like I used that example before. We still use Newtonian physics for doing engineering and whatnot, right? I would guess most science would use that instead of using quantum mechanics, because it wouldn't make sense to do it from a quantum mechanics kind of way. Right. They are unable to view reality as something non-mechanical, something which, despite clearly having a literal machine-like component, is also ultimately unpredictable, immeasurable, spontaneous, and uncaused. The state of all experience we call alive. Yeah, and here we... Yeah, that's... Yeah, when you do science, you can't, right? This doesn't help you. So unable, right? You're not wanting to, right? It's not unable, like incompetence. It's more like put it to the side, right? We say that in this context, in the context of science, it is not important, right? All these things, these examples, the immeasurability, the spontaneous and uncaused stuff, those are of no import in science. Yeah. That doesn't mean that they are not important at all. It just means that in this context, they are not relevant. They are put to the side. Yeah. Not actually. I'm not. I'm not even sure that you do that in all science. Right? Maybe it's more similar to, like, if I study... what do I study? Computer science? I don't know, maths. Alright. Let's say that I study... Well, no, that's not science necessarily. Alright, if I study the biology... If I study wolves, for example. If I study the biology of wolves... I don't care about quantum mechanics, right? Because it's out of the scope. Yeah. Out of scope. Perhaps you might think the physicalists consider the mechanistic universe to be just a metaphor. I mean, maybe. Sure. I mean, those metaphors has been increasing more and more, right? About in psychology, for example, now we talk about computers. Not as mechanical things, but like computers. We compare it and do metaphors, but I don't actually agree, no. They consider the universe to be, right? In the scope of the question, you take the assumption that the universe is mechanistic. Yeah. But if that's the case, why is it preferred over organic metaphor? Well, in biology, you do an organic metaphor. Yeah. In biology, you would use other types of metaphor, mechanicalistic. Right? You talk about choice, right? That wants, needs. Those are organic metaphors, not mechanistic. Alright. Or maybe it is literally true, but then how are we to know? I mean, it doesn't matter. What kind of test could be devised to confirm such a theory? How could it ever be refuted? Of course it could not. There is no way ever to test whether the world is mechanical with mechanical tests, any more than rationality can determine whether rationality can ultimately know the world. Sure. Right, again, sure, this is not an argument against any of the ideas, in my mind. Literalism is founded on facticity and causality, but is unable to explain how non-facticity and non-causality could have created facticity and causality, and how the universe, consciousness, experience, or knowledge came to be for the transparent reason that it is impossible. And so all literalists, whatever stripe, have to posit miracles or explain it or redefine the problem of existence or knock up a smokescreen of philosophical technical jargon to hide their ignorance, or the most common approach is to pretend it doesn't exist. Management never addresses consciousness, politicians never mention the universe, and the word ineffable is never heard in the lab, proceeding as if consciousness is either an illusion or a literal material object inhabiting an essential, comprehensible clockwork universe that just happened. Alright. Yeah, this I kind of feel that the text here is just completely stuck in a way of thinking. Oh, hello, Goetz. You're back, eh? How are you doing? Not playing anymore. Now we're talking philosophy. Yeah, it's like this text really have a problem with scope, right? Definitely have a, like, when you talk to politics about, I don't know, healthcare system, a theory for how the universe was created is not relevant. It's just not. It's not that one does not pretend it doesn't exist. it's just not relevant. It's why would you talk about the creation of the universe and how would that help you in the politics of healthcare, right? It's right. You don't talk physics in the politics of healthcare. No, you talk about management of people and health and medication and money and all the stuff that is relevant. And this text attacking people for not talking about stuff like that, that's just, right? You can attack anyone, anytime, for whatever reason with this logic, right? It's just ugly rhetorics. Goetzes, where's this from, if I may ask? Oh, ask away, right? Do you want a summary of the thing? Alright, we can make a short summary of the thing. Goetzes, I'm not sure if this is meant to be an attack. Oh, that's my interpretation so far. It feels like an attack. Alright, it's from some dude called Darren Allen. It's called The Limits of Literalism. Literalism, by the way, it's not something that exists outside of this text. That's one of my main criticisms, is that Darren Allen here constructed literalism. He said that all of these things, theism, atheism, dualism, monism, subjectivism, objectivism, idealism, realism, he says all of these things are literalism. They are examples of literalism, and he's saying all of them are dumb, which is like he made something up and then he said it was dumb, which is like the literal definition of a straw man. That's like literally what a straw man is, right? He has some valid points though, right? It's talking about the problem with subjectivism, right? It's a lot of the arguments from in here are just purely subjectivist, that he's saying that the self can never know objective reality, right? I don't know what the experience is like just being a rock, a stone, right? And that's a valid point, right? That's a lot of stuff what this is about, just saying that the self cannot know, right? Just like I cannot for a fact know what you feel, right? That's skepticism, which is generally accepted in philosophical terms, right? That is generally accepted, right? I don't know, right? I cannot know. How could I know? But it kind of like the text goes on and on, then kind of just making arguments that because that is the case, science, religion, any kind of idea, epistemological idea, right? Any idea of knowledge becomes invalid, says this text. From my understanding, right? I might misunderstand the text. That is definitely something that might happen. But from my understanding, and that's the only thing I can go from, right? From my interpretation of the text is attacking all these things of knowledge. Right? It's saying that, right, we cannot ultimately know the world, therefore all these things are dumb. It doesn't say it straight out, but it is an attack. Alright. Where are we? Alright. This bizarre reality, a conscious universe spontaneously springing from the head of Zeus, mirroring in some equally fantastic way a reality that can never be directly experienced, is one that most people in the world inhabit today. Let's see. Goetz says, I see now how this is indeed an attack. Thanks for your efforts to bring me up to speed. Right, no problem at all. Like, we're here. I love to talk about these things. And if you're just confused and don't know what's going on, that's not really helpful for talking about these things, right? And also, bear in mind, right, that was my interpretation. My biases shine through, right? So it's probably an unfair reading, the shortness that I just gave you. All right. All right, something that is also, I feel that another problem that I've seen with this text is that it conflates experience with knowledge, like intellectual knowledge and experience of a thing, right? They are not the same thing. Like, there is an example, right? If I know every fact there is about the color red, right? I can know the wavelengths, I can know this and that and this and that. Just all the facts. I can read the whole Wikipedia page and all the collected knowledge about the color red. But then one day, I get cured from my color blindness, and I don't no longer see the world in black and white. Have I learned something new? Right. And so there's a difference between experience and intellectual knowledge, and this text is kind of intermingling them quite a bit, right? And this kind of feels like that away, right? And also, parts of reality can be directly experienced. A point that I have as well, right? All my experiences that I have, my experiences of the color red, my experience, how it feels when I drink my favorite example here, the water. I feel the cold touch my tongue and it just falling. I don't know, being transported down to my stomach. That experience is part of reality, and I directly experienced it, right? So some parts can be directly experienced, I would say. Most people in here have been today? I wonder what that is. Goetz says you cannot not include your personal perspective. Indeed. We've been talking about that a lot. Yeah, I like that. I've been used a mirror as an example, which is interesting that it's used here as well. Goetz says, yes, I'm with you on this. The experiencing. Indeed, right. Gotta grab a fresh coffee quickly, be back in a flash. All right, Spirit, see you in a bit then. Hope you like your coffee. Hope it becomes some nice tasting coffee for you, yeah. Alright, nobody seriously explores the nature or limits of this make-believe ideology, our worldview, at least not at work. Actually, that brings me back to the previous article about self-reliance. Definitely, some people are. I mean, I would say, like, if we're talking about people, the author of this text, I would say, would probably be a person to explore the nature of the limits. Right? Isn't that kind of what the text is about? And I did it. I felt like I did it. Especially at the start. Like, I felt like I improved my metaphysical understanding of the world. Yeah, I feel like after reading this article, I have an improved metaphysical exploration of the nature of the limits of the make-believe ideology, our worldview. Yeah. And here again with this is the part that annoys me with the text, right? At least not at work. No, because at work you do your work, right? Sure, you talk about these things. Actually, I would prefer you talk about politics rather than metaphysics, but why not talk metaphysics as well? Just don't... what's that word? Don't force it upon people. Yeah, don't force this upon people. And that's back to the self-reliance thing, right? My thinking is that people should do what... Right? What was that again? Yeah, you do you, right? People who are interested in metaphysics, like myself, we can do these things. And we can talk about these things with others. Someone who's not interested in this, And the they who are not interested, who are interested in other stuff, don't force this upon them. Yeah. Philosophy is an acquired taste, I guess. It's not for everyone. Like, is there something that is for everyone? Eating, I suppose. Eating. But philosophy is not compared to eating. Right. It is assumed to be the only explanation of the universe, although that assumption cannot itself be literally justified without getting sucked into a tautologous mind warp. You can't literally prove that literal proof is the only method of discovering truth without automatically ruling out non-literal methods. Actually, this argument I like from the author, yeah. If you do an assumption, right? And everybody does that, right? In your worldview, you make assumptions. And you build your worldview on these assumptions. I would agree with an attack that just because you made an assumption, that is the assumption everybody else has to make. Right? If we're talking about an ethical thing here. So far, if that is indeed where we're going, then yeah, my assumptions, I would definitely argue for my assumptions being better than someone else's assumptions. Because they're mine, just like anyone else would argue for their assumptions being better. Which is a good thing to do. Right? In these arguments, there can be made improvements. Yeah. Not proof, but improvements. Right? Take just this article as an example. I have bashed on it quite a bit. Not at the start, but not at the broad introductions of the thing. But the closer to the actual point we're getting, the more hostile I become. But I've still learned stuff and improved my own worldviews. And from these arguments, yeah, we can do that. But if someone has a stuck frame of mind and say, well, my assumptions are true, then I have to go with this text, right? They are not. Yeah. Right. Thus, all non-literal accounts of reality are not reasoned away, but reflexively dismissed as insane forms of subjectivist solipsism. Alright, and I can agree with this. If we're talking about ethics now, if we're not talking about metaphysics, we're not talking about metaphysics anymore or philosophy. Now we're talking about how to treat other people that thinks differently than you. And reflexively dismissing people, I mean, I guess that is part of humanity, and it's easy to tend to do that. I don't know if that's just a norm, or if it's how we work as people. But it doesn't really matter. I would argue from an ethical standpoint, yeah, don't do this. Yeah, don't reflexively dismiss people. And if you do and they point out that, right, if someone reflexively dismisses you, point that out, that you just did that to me, and give them an opportunity to, well, apologize. Not necessarily apologize, but whoops, oh, that was a reflex from my point, right? It is super easy to make mistakes. And that's a mistake. I would agree with that. Right. Yeah, we can get this as well. Actually, I want to double check solipsism again. It's the philosophical idea that only one's mind is sure to exist. They are not, right? I mean, philosophy, can they be insane? No, they're just different ideas. They're all valuable, right? Feels like the author here has been... it feels that it's getting emotional, right? It's been... emotion has been bubbling below the surface for a long time, but here it kind of comes to a head, right? That this author has been ridiculed or whatnot, and therefore has snowed in on this. Alright. Solipsism is the only way to reject physicalism within the confines of the self. Is it? I don't know. The solipsist denies objective facticity and causality, either rationally concluding, as Hume, one of the godfathers of modern solipsism, did, that neither can be found in the world. Irrationality, dismissing them as forms of control by external agencies, souls, gods, governments, aliens, them. Alright, the them. Alright, solipsism denies facticity and causality. I mean, that's great. Yeah, study that. Try to figure out another way. Which is not what this text has been doing, by the way, right? This has not been a text for solipsism, right? There has been no solipsistic subjective explorations of the world. Not really. It's pretty much just been skepticism and saying that, oh, none of these people are looking at skepticism. But the text itself has not really looked at solipsistic views either. It has just said that everybody else is so dumb. And we're like super far down. You know me, I'm not super impressed with people just trying to tear other people down. I don't, like, there are, when you try to tear people down, I don't like it for some reason. I would prefer someone trying to build something up, right? What is that alternative, right? Instead of saying all religious people are dumb, all atheists are dumb, all subjectivists are dumb, all holists are... Like, instead of saying everybody is dumb, what makes you so smart? Is it just solipsism? But is that just the point? And do you have to have a solipsistic view of reality always? Can be found in the world. Wait, let's see that. Neither can be found in the world. Facticity and causality. Which is just not true. Right, or irrationally dismissing them as forms of control by external agencies. Wait. Some solipsists dismiss them as forms of control by external agencies. Yeah, conspiracy theorists. Wait, would that be a conspiracy? Causality would be a conspiracy? I don't get it. Go, it says here again. Welcome back. Yeah. We're talking about solipsism now, which is the idea that the only thing we can be sure about is that one's mind exists. And rejection of, where was it? Causality. Yeah. Facts and causality they reject because they think that they cannot be found in the world. But I would say that if the mind exists in the world and the mind experiences facts and causality, then they do exist in the world because the mind exists in the world. Alright, let's continue. Instead of the factual and the causal, the solipsist adheres to the unreal and the arbitrary. A subjective reality.
It's the
deep breaths.
before the plunge.
Instead of the factual and the causal, the solipsist adheres to the unreal and the arbitrary. Subjective reality which has no objective counterpart and therefore is based on random choice. How do you know random exists? Right. Randomness would be... How do you know, right? If you cannot know if something is factual or causal, how do you know that random is a thing? How can you know? Alright. And therefore it's based on random choice, personal whim, or whatever, association. Oh, why is that bolded? Association based on similarity being a solipsistic causality. It's at hand. This was interesting. I don't know what it means. Goethe says you can observe random. Alright, but you can observe causes as well. Right? Solipsists reject observation. Yeah. Because observations are inherent, like that's kind of the argument that the text has done, that like the subjectivist view that all observations of the outside world are inherently untrustworthy. That's kind of the argument, that there are no facts because how can you trust anything about the outside world? And saying that something is random choice is a statement about the outside world, right? So the same argument, like... I think, anyway. Goethe says you can observe that feedback system don't have a linear relationship between cause and effect. How do you mean linear relationship? I mean, from my worldview, and I'm not saying that, like, my experience of the world is that true randomness is not a thing. Stuff appears random just because I cannot predict them. That is random from my point of view. That's my understanding of the word. But, like, that is completely different from the view of the world of this text. Goethe says, I understand. Right, linear relationship is more focused and stronger effect. More force results in stronger effect. Oh, right. That's, I was talking about inductive before instead of deductive. But, like, we're talking about observation, right? You kind of seem like a scientifically minded person as well, just as me. This person is not, right? This person kind of rejects science. So, trying to argue with this text from a frame of reference of science, I think it's a mistake. I'm trying not to, but like science and math and logic, that is not really where this text is coming from. Right, Goethe says, but in a feedback system, a system which influences itself, like a double pendulum, right, you don't have this connection. Isn't that chaos theory we're talking about now? Is that it? I think I saw a Veritasium video about that, like a year ago. About the butterfly effect, right? There are some systems that influence themselves, and they become super fucking difficult to predict, like the weather. Goethe says, yes, it's about chaos theory. There we go, yeah. Like the weather, for example. You cannot predict the weather for more than like a week, and then it becomes inherently unreliable. But one could argue, like the physicalists would argue that, well, that's just because we don't know everything. There are always outside forces that are in play, and small, that's the butterfly effect, right? Small variance causes, like, the more it interacts with itself, the more chaotic it becomes, right? And the more difficult it becomes to, yeah, And that's the world we live in, right? There is no, like from a science point of view, there is no perfect experiment where you can remove all outside interaction, right? Because there is always stuff that happens. Quantum fluctuations and whatnot can interact with anything and make small changes. You can get hit by a solar, what's that? A photon, and something changes, right? I guess that's Goetz says they are impossible to predict. I don't know if I agree with the impossibility. I just say that we cannot predict them. Right? With perfect knowledge, you can have perfect prediction, right? Chaos theory doesn't reject that, I don't think. I'm not a mathematician, so this is not my area of expertise. That's my understanding. All right, Goetz continued. And the reason is not that you have insufficient data. Oh, it's not that you have. Right, that's what I thought. I thought it was insufficient data. Goetz says, and that's the world we live in? Indeed, that's what I believe. All right, right. So just because it is interacting with itself, it's not, right? Oh, because probably you can build a mathematical chaotic model, right? Yes. That's what the Veritism video, the video I saw about it, was about. It was that you can build a mathematical model that becomes chaotic. And the mathematical model is the perfect experiment, right? That is because it's free from outside interference. That's interesting. Goetz says perfect knowledge is impossible when the details are infinitesimally small and therefore infinite. Gee, I struggle with my English here. Sorry, no problem. You hear me struggle as well. And that's fine. I mean, my interpretation and my understanding, I think I understand you, right? If we notice the misunderstanding, then highlight it for sure. All right. Right. There we go. That's the world we'll live in. But my argument is that just because we'll live in a chaotic world does not reject the possibility of predictions. We can predict the weather for a couple of days right? It becomes impossible to predict. It becomes that after a while, after a few interactions, right? The first interactions are predictable, right? So it's not impossible. And you can build predictions that, like, I'm more of a pragmatist myself, so I say, well, obviously we have built computers. So we have predicted what all these smashing these rocks together, what will happen. All right, we will get a screen and a computer, right? But that's interesting that that would be a boom. Well, actually, I think the text did touch on this. Yeah, the text did touch on that earlier, just on the side. Not as a big argument for its view, but it was an argument. Oh. Goetz says we can take a good guess at what the weather may be. Exactly, that's prediction. That's the whole area of science, right? Science is inductive, not... Well, you can do deduction as well, right? But when you do statistical analysis, that's all inductive. And we say that that is predictable with a certain reliability. Right? Goetz says we can... Alright, yeah, we can guess, and some experts have a fascinating knowledge of this. I can imagine, yeah. But an accurate prediction is something different. Yes, right? That it depends where you draw the line, right? Do you want it deductive? Do you want it to be completely 100% true? Right? But then you don't use the same methodology, right? And I think these things only happen... I guess these things can happen in mathematics, right? 1 plus 1 is always equals to 2. Right? There are stuff that are just stuck within that... within those axioms, within those basic assumptions. Like skepticism in philosophy, right? For now, at least, the understanding for now, it seems to be no way out of it. There seems to be a limit to literalism, as the text says. And I mean, I'm not rejecting that. I don't think anyone would reject, like, philosophically minded, that's saying that, well, everything that you experience happens within your experience and it's inherently untrustworthy, right? Even your maths, right? Even your chaotic maths, right? That is coming from an observer. And that observer, right, might say that something is impossible to predict, but how trustworthy is said observer? But then again, like, that's doing the same mistake that I'm complaining that this text is doing, right? It's not in the scope, right? The role of the observer is not, or the self is not really relevant when you talk chaos theory. And that's the same mistake that this dude is doing. This dude is saying that chaos theory is inherently meaningless because the self is untrustworthy. And I think that's not a very good argument. Alright. What was this, though? This last bit I missed. The sentences are so long. Alright. A subjective reality which has no objective counterpart and therefore is based on random choice. Oh, yeah. Solipsists, that's... I guess they are the true subjectivists, like extreme subjectivists. I don't understand the difference between solipsism and subjectivism so far. But that's my assumption for now. They say that there is no objective stuff, right? Everything is generated from within. Alright, and they say, alright, it's either random choice, personal whim, or whatever, association. Alright, they don't know. That's what they're saying. The solipsists. It can be random choice, it can be personal whim, or whatever association. I get it, that was my misunderstanding. Association based on similarity being solipsistic causality at hand. Does it talk about association here? If we search for nope. Alright, let's just skip that bit and move on, I suppose. Alright, the extreme solipsist, the schizophrenic. Ooh, that's an unfortunate name. Extreme solipsist, the schizophrenic, is confined to a catatonic universe or self-generated illusion. But most solipsists can function perfectly well in the world without retreating to an inner world of concepts. Right. And here comes... I just made that a little while ago, the problem I have with the difference of intellectual knowledge and, like, reasoning and experience, right? The schizophrenic experience the world in a certain way, right? And then there is knowledge about how a schizophrenic experiences the world. Solipsism is a philosophical thing, right? That's what it says. Philosophical idea. Solipsism, right? You can have experiences about solipsism, but you don't have solipsistic. I mean, sure, schizophrenic would be a solipsistic experience, but I don't like this way of looking at the world. It's just... it confuses me. Right, where was I? High-functioning solipsist inhabits the same... Alright, yeah, here we were. Go, it says me neither. Ah, yeah. So it's not just me. Right, the high-functioning solipsist inhabits the same egoic world as the physicalists. Yeah, sure, like, when I dream, that is the same reality, or when I hallucinate, when I take the LSD and I just don't see anything that exists in the real world, it's still part of the real world, which is one thing that I'm in agreement with this text, right? Everything that happens in the real world. Right? My experience is part of reality. Obviously. Actually, I don't want to say obviously. From my understanding, it seems like a no-brainer, but of course it's not, right? Philosophy is not necessarily easy, and not everybody has studied what I have studied, but from my point of view, yeah. Alright. The high-functioning solipsist inhabits the same... alright, yeah. Making the same literal distinction between the inner subject and the outer object. Not the same, a similar. There's a difference. Make a similar distinction. And outer object, but solipsistic meaning is handed over to the subject in order to serve the temporary needs of the ego, which frequently demands that rationality, objectivity, and causal reason be abandoned so that it can justify itself and lie to others. Oh man, it's so rude. It's not lying. Damn it, it's not lying. But I am kind of in agreement, right? But this, for me, is not a metaphysical argument for the understanding of the world, but rather a semantic one. A semantic argument for thinking about the language that you use, right? I like Hume. I haven't read all of Hume, but I really like Hume's guillotine. I love Hume's guillotine. It's a great guillotine. Where it pretty much says that all opinions are just that, opinions, and you cannot derive them from facts. Right? A fact is one thing, and an opinion is something completely different, and one thing does not lead to the other. And having a linguistic idea that, right, when I talk about opinions, I should not talk about right or wrong, true or false, good or evil. I should maybe change my language to reflect that it is my opinion I am talking about, right? Because murder cannot be right or wrong, right? It's my opinion is that I don't like murder or I like murder, right? Murder itself, there is no inherently right or wrong in it, in that Humean framing of language, right? And I kind of guess that that's similar to what the point this text is doing. Even though it's kind of rude and calling people liars, it's just that what someone might be saying might not really work from this text's worldview. And that the same thing goes for Hume's guillotine and the right and wrong. That's my worldview, right? So the argument is just for my language. And I would argue with others to change their language. Well, actually I wouldn't, no. I would argue for them to change their worldview, not their language. Because that's kind of rude as well, telling other people how to speak. Right? There's nothing inherently better in my way to speak, even though I like it better, of course. I like semantics. Goethe says, talk about a personal right or wrong. Yeah, exactly. You can... But it's like... It kind of implies that there's only one way to do things, right? Right or wrong. It's kind of binary still, just like good and evil. It's kind of binary. You don't talk about something being right-er or wrong-er. So, but I guess people do have binary look at the world, black and white, and then it would make sense for them to use black and white language. I would probably argue for, not looking at the world as black and white. Have a black and white opinions about the world. That is what I would argue against, I guess. Goethe says, exactly, good and evil is always a personal idea. Yeah. But it's a good idea for a group to agree on common sets of good and evil. Yeah, definitely. Right? We call that politics. Right? Norms. Politics and norms. Makes a group stronger? It does indeed, yeah. It's just something I'm very interested in is where do you justify these opinions? Where do they come from? And I've had this idea, right, that for a long time, they have been assumed to come from the outside, right? God told me, or this ideology told me. But I think where the world is working is that, it's my responsibility. It's my responsibility as an individual in the group to decide what do I, like, if you think democracy is a good idea, then it's my responsibility to have an idea of what do I think is good, what do I think is bad, what do I like, what don't I like. To influence the rest of the group, right? Because the agreement of the group, that's what democracy is all about, right? Finding an agreement. What is good, what is evil? And I think it's on the responsibility of the individual, yeah. Goethe says, which is why everyone would love to convince everyone else that he's got the perfect idea of right and wrong. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I would be a great dictator. Oh man, I would be so great. It would not all fall to ruin. Yeah, civilization would not fall to ruin if I became the dictator, I promise. Actually, I would be a terrible dictator, but that's not because of my ideas. That's because I would not be competent. Well, if it was like the Douglas Adams dictator, people just came and asked me questions, that would be fine. I could do that job. And someone else implemented it. But I don't know if it would be... I don't think it would be a preferable thing, because that would be a lot of power and that would be corrupting. And I think a lot of people would be oppressed from my opinions. I'm for democracy, though. I like that better. That we agree together in a society, in a group. Because the group becomes stronger if it doesn't alienate some members of the group, right? Yeah, I would prefer not alienating people. Let's see. Goethe says the core is that a single-cell organism will find one path to lead to food while another end is at a blocker. What do you mean? This organism experiences one path as good and the other one as bad. Yeah. But that's not, like, again, there are, barring mathematics, there is no real world pure experiments, right? There is not two directions to walk. Ends at a blocker. Yeah, of course. Sorry about the silly apostrophe. Oh, it's fine. For me, from my point of view, you never have to apologize for that stuff. I mean, misunderstandings happen. I think it worked out just fine. Just fine indeed. Yeah, in real life, there's stuff you move towards and there are stuff you move away from. Actually, that sounds a little bit like Bruce Lipton. Have you heard about Bruce Lipton? Yeah, the argument you made. As below, so above. As above, so below. I don't remember. Yeah. That was a long time ago I heard that. Goethe says? No, I haven't heard of him yet. Oh man, that must have been like 10 years ago I listened to Bruce Lipton. I don't know how well it will hold up. I think he became very new agey. Yeah. Very new agey. But that's the argument, right? Love and hate, or good and bad, or whatever. And neutrality, right? I don't care about the rock that's over. There's a rock over there, I don't care about it. There's some water over here, oh, I like that. Oh man, there's someone giving me the finger over there, oh, I don't like that. Right, that's the the basis of organism behavior, yeah. Right. Alright, that was a sidetrack. Let's get back. Did I read the whole thing? I think so. Right. While orientation towards the objective world of physicalism is favored by businessmen, managers, scientists, and men. Alright? The subjectivity of solipsism is the preferred philosophy of liars, artists, addicts, and women. What? Did this text just call women liars? Did that just happen? What just happened? It's just like, whoa! Whoa! No, what it's doing is, just like it's attacking physicalism, it's attacking solipsism. Right? That's where we're going, right? It spent a lot of time attacking physicalism, and now it's gonna start attacking solipsism as well. Which is kind of that was the point that it was trying to make earlier, right? It's been... Actually, I've been waiting for this shoe to drop, the attack on solipsism. I mean, I prefer both. Like, I like philosophy. I think both... Like the text said at the start, right? It said subjectivism and objectivism, and it kind of said that they appear to be antagonistic opposites, and I don't think that. Like, I haven't thought that for a long time. Subjectivism and objectivism being versus each other. Like, philosophy is more fluid than that, in my opinion. Yeah, it's like you pick and choose, you can cherry pick, and you build a worldview around these ideas. And we talk in these extreme solipsism and physicalistic ways just to make it easy to understand, right? This is the extreme side of this logic. That is how we present it, right? We make it about solipsism, while few actual people identify as being solipsistic, and I would argue that being any istic, like any ism, is a mistake from my point of view. Yeah. Goethe says, oh boy, now he's losing it. Maybe, we'll see. We'll see where it's going. Losing it because of his distinction between men and women, right? That's preferred philosophy of men and women. That's... I would require... Like, I am very physicalistic inclined, right? So from my worldview, I would want to see statistics on this. Yeah, I would want to see statistics on this. Otherwise, that doesn't come instinctively to me, yeah. Intuitive. It's not intuitive to me that men and women would prefer different philosophies. Yeah. But if I see some statistics, I could get behind it. I don't see any, like... It can be, like... I wouldn't say preferred, I would say a tendency. Tendency, like, there are... You can find some tendencies where men tend one way and women tend another way, but it's not, yeah, black and white. You get two normal... You get two bell curves. You can get two bell curves just switched like that. Just next to each other. Just for reference. Bell curve. No? Yeah. Here we go. Yeah, you can get where the middle is just a little, there's a little offshoot to one side and the other side. Different tendencies. Not like black and white, just one's middle is a little bit to that side or that side. Or they can even actually have a different amplitude as well. I heard somewhere, interestingly, don't quote me on this because I don't remember the reference, but I did hear that when you look at the differences between men and women at different traits, men's traits or bell curves tends to be flatter, right? That we tend to be more extreme on both ends. Don't quote me on that, but I find that interesting. That would be support because violence, right? Violent crime, that's always men. Because, well, not always, but that's because men is like far out here on the normal distribution curve. And that's why I found that interesting, because I have always thought about the switch. That's because why the tail end has been men. That's why men tend to be more violent. But it can also be like a flatter curve and what's that called when they are deviating? Yeah, a small deviation. It can be both things, right? Goethe says it's the same nonsense as this from Mars, from Venus ball. I mean, there are differences between men and women for sure, but it's like they're not that significant, right? To make these kinds of statements, right? Like making the statement that men are more violent than women, that's a dumb statement. Just men tend more towards violence, right? Violent crime. And that doesn't make me violent, right? Because I end up somewhere on a normal distribution as well, right? It's just some men are more violent than everyone else because they end up in the tail. And it tends more often to be men, but like judging all of men based on that fact, that's kind of dumb, right? Goethe says, I would like to see statistics. Exactly, right? Oh, you're like me. You're a physicalist. Actually, I'm not. I suppose I am because of the pragmatist in me, but I'm all behind subjectivism as well. Solipsism, right? Skepticism and all that. I concede that thing, and I think most physicalists do. Goethe says, violent crimes, not always men, and often enough invoked by women. Yeah, of course, yeah. It's just the tendency, right? That doesn't mean that men are necessarily more violent. It's just like, when I've been out drinking, I can, like, from my own experience, and I know that is anecdotal, right? But if you talk to people and they go out drinking, and when fist fights occur, doesn't tend to be like it happens between women for sure, right? It's just more often happening with men. And one could, like, that is a fact, right? That is what happens. And one could argue that is because of...
It's down there somewhere. Let me
deep breaths. One can argue genetics, nature versus nurture, but that's oftentimes it's nature and nurture, right? So it's not genetically just that men are different. It's probably some few genetic differences, and there's probably, like, if you look at different cultures, that violence is probably like the deviation is smaller or greater depending on what culture you end up in, right? So a lot of the violence come from culture. That doesn't negate the fact that the culture raises men that tends to be more violent. I'm not saying that all men are violent, definitely not. And yeah. Goethe says education plays a big role in who is and isn't violent. Indeed. Education and socioeconomic background, right? That's a big, I think that's probably a very big predictor. Socioeconomic background. And more than all of those, parenting. If your parents beat you up and fuck you up, that's what you learn. Violence, yeah. Goethe says you can observe how things are shifting today. Probably, yeah. Goethe says there were numerous women involved in the Capitol riot, right? I didn't look into it, but I would assume so, yeah. Would assume so, right? Yeah, and that's pulling it back to preferring different philosophies, right? I would say that is... Yeah, that's a different type of violence as well, right? From what we were talking about, that's violence against the government. And that's very different. I think that's more about the preferred philosophies. And I have not seen any stats about different... Goethe says, I didn't look into it either, just trying to remember the TV footage I saw. Yeah, right. Protesting. Yeah, there's... Right? Violence is a scale. Violence is not black and white. Right? The extreme type of violence, that the fisticuffs violence, that is one type of violence. And then there's the vocal violence as well. Right? Protesting, shutting down the streets, stuff like that. That could be considered violence against the state, right? Maybe? Activism? Alright. Let's see where this is going. The former require useful representations of the world, which they can rationally defend. The latter a useless representation, which they can irrationally defend. Alright, that's come... Alright, I see where they're coming from now with the men and women difference. Right? Women tend to be... Again, tend to be... There is a tendency to be more socially skilled, right? There's a social aptitude. Social cohesion. Women tend to be better at creation, right? And that would be like expressing emotions, right? That's a cliche, right? The man who can't express his emotions. And that is what one looks at, right? You look at the self, you're introspective of your emotions. That would be the solipsistic experience of the world, while the physicalistic experience of the world would be more to look at tendencies in nature, right? Looking at this and that. I don't know if these cliches spell an actual tendency difference, or if that's just a cultural thing that TV has told me, or if it's an actual thing, I can't say. And I would definitely hesitate to make the statement that just because you have these type of experiences and these type of personalities, that would lead one to prefer one philosophy over another. Yeah, maybe that's the case, but I think they can influence, yeah. But I think there's a lot of stuff that influences one's preference of philosophy, right? Most people don't even prefer philosophy at all, right? There's a lot of people that don't like philosophy. And that's fine, so finding these? Maybe. Alright. Because both are essentially egoic, essentially the same, they're not the same. They are similar. From this text's point of view, that they are both, right? They come from experience, sure. And because life is a complex affair, self can leap from one to the other, right? Choosing which to adhere to over the course of a life, or even a day, or a context. Yeah, this I like, yeah. I think that's a healthy approach to life, right? Switch around. Yeah, right. You don't have to talk about your emotions when you're building an scientific experiment. Your emotions are not really relevant. If you're talking about your day at the job with your wife, then your emotions are, right? And then the ins and out of the exact results of the experiment is not as relevant, right? Yeah, you jump back and forth, and depending on context. Makes a lot of sense. A man may be a rational literalist in class, a semi-rational solipsist in church, a practical literalist in the office, and an airy-fairy solipsist at the guitar or the art gallery, and an android-like physicalist when he's arguing with his wife, and a self-absorbed hyper-idealist when he has a breakdown and just can't take it anymore. Yes and no. I mean, you can have these tendencies and you can talk from this point of view, but I wouldn't say that you are not an ist. You're not an ist in any of these, right? An ist kind of implies that this is what you are always. I'm an, I suppose that's just semantics. I can be fine with this. Yeah. That you can be all these different kind of things depending on the situation. Right, and I can be many of these. That's what the problem was. You can be many of these things at once, right? You can be an airy-fairy solipsist and a hardline realist scientist at the same time, right? Depending on the context. Right? If you take a holistic kind of approach. Well, I suppose not in the same second, right? You switch back and forth from the different kind of attitudes, but that's not kind of what happens. No, that's not what happens at all. No, you're both. You are both, and then the ideas come to you. It can come from one side or the other side, right? The arguments, the ideas, they can come from wherever in your situation. So you can be all of them at the same time. Go ahead, says, sound about right, yes? Oh, nice. All right, but that is lunchtime for me, because we're at the 8th paragraph. Actually, I want to summarize a little bit before I leave. All right, it has, right? We started out by bashing on the mechanics, the literalists, that I say that people are not. But if they were, then yeah, that was extreme isms within philosophy is easy to argue against, wherever they may be. And that's why it's doing. It's attacking all of them. I guess maybe that's where the conclusion is moving, right? This kind of implies that this is where the conclusion is moving. That you can be many things at once. Goetz says, thank you very much for your entertaining stream. Oh, thank you for hanging out and your kind words. Yeah. I have a good time. I'm glad you did as well. Yeah. Maybe see you again in the future. And have a good one. Thanks for hanging out. Cheers.